Hello? Hi, I'm Barbara Deck. We're going to get started. Wait for people to sit down. Okay, welcome. A special welcome to everybody who is staying on this 500th anniversary of the canonization of Saints Ignatius and Saint Francis Xavier. We're beginning a quest to follow Ignatius's invitation to see all things new in Christ. It's going to require ideas and perspectives from everyone. So we want to find out how what you hear about Laudato Si, or about the... Debbie says I can take down my mask. I hope that's better. How what you hear about Laudato Si and the climate crisis connects with you and with the parish. We want to hear your ideas and your interests, and Strad is now going to give you an overview of the very wonderful Laudato Si.
The foundation of all the work we do is Laudato Si. Shortly after it was published in 2015, Father James Martin described the top 10 takeaways. This is a version of what he said. First, the spiritual perspective is now part of the discussion of the environment. Laudato Si brings the language of faith to the environmental dialogue. Politicians, scientists, and economists can't solve the problem by themselves. They need the voice of faith. 2, the poor are disproportionately affected by climate change. The poor bear the greatest effects, even though they are excluded from the benefits of the global economy. 3, less is more. The core problem is a society of extreme consumerism. People are unable to resist market forces. Christian spirituality offers a redefinition of our notion of progress. 4, as an encyclical, Laudato Si enters into the canon of Catholic social teachings on the environment. This is based on traditional foundations of Catholic social teaching, particularly the common good. 5, discussions about ecology can be grounded in the Bible and church traditions. Pope Francis talks about the gospel of creation. He traces the themes of love for creation in both the Old and the New Testament through the saints and the life of Jesus Christ. 6, everything is connected, including the economy. Laudato Si offers a systemic approach to climate change and the limits of the market. Profit cannot be the sole criterion in our decisions. 7, scientific research on the environment is to be praised and used. Laudato Si draws upon both church teaching and contemporary findings from other fields, particularly science, to help modern-day people reflect on these questions. We have to pay attention to what scientists have discovered. 8, widespread indifference and selfishness worsen environmental problems. We cannot care for the rest of nature if our hearts lack tenderness, compassion, and concern for our fellow human beings. Why does this happen? Because frequently decision makers are far removed from the poor, physically, with no real contact to their brothers and sisters. Where is the notion of common good? 9, global dialogue and solidarity are needed. Laudato Si uses references from around the world. Pope Francis calls into dialogue all people about our common home. And finally, we need a change of heart. Thanks to our actions, the earth has become to look like more and more, in Pope Francis' words, an immense pile of filth. Pope Francis calls for a new way of looking at things, a bold cultural revolution. In the words of the Ignatian year, to see all things new in Christ. There is hope. God is with us. Individually and corporately, we can awaken our hearts and move towards an ecological conversion. That is, to see the intimate connection between God and all beings, more readily listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Our next speaker is Ron Lacey, who's going to talk about the Ignatian model of call and response.
Thanks, Strad. We're living in times that are, sadly, similar to those of Ignatius and Francis Xavier. The horrors of war shock the world, and it's against this backdrop that we speak today of conversion. Both our saints were shaped by war. Ignatius was a soldier whose conversion began during his convalescence following his injury. It's funny how God consistently calls soldier saints off the battlefield, never to. And Francis was 6 when Spain began a war of invasion that lasted for 18 years against Navarre. But we know a horror today, have known it for 77 years, that people of the past could never have imagined. The world is on high alert as Putin makes nuclear threats. And we have to ask, who is this one pathetic old man? Not just to kill so many people, including children, but to threaten a continent and maybe a planet with annihilation. Who has such a right? And the truth is, sad as it is, that we may not be so blatant about it, but we claim to have such a right. We claim that the earth is our playground, and that her creatures, including future human generations, are to be sacrificed to our greed, our comfort, and our complacency. In the spiritual exercises, Ignatius speaks of 2 standards, flags or banners, one of Jesus and one of the world. And do we fight on the side of light and truth and goodness, or on the side of darkness, falsehood, and moral depravity? Wickedness, of course, is not always manifest. It's often an underlying condition, the 3 poisons that the Buddhists warn us against: hatred, anger, inordinate attachment. Ignatius was 38 when he met Francis Xavier, who was then 23. Francis was noble, affluent, studying at Paris, preparing for a career at court. He was not a bad person, but content with the status quo. Ignatius was, by the standards of the day, entering late middle age, and he was having trouble with his studies because he was not fluent with Latin. He and Francis were roommates. Francis thought him somewhat comical, until the day Ignatius asked him, "If you give your soul for all the world, what do you really gain?" This was the beginning of Xavier's conversion, and he would go on to become a missionary to Asia, and many would say the greatest missionary since St. Paul. Our call may not be as dramatic or as dangerous as Francis's, but our challenge is no less important: to be missionaries to our own people. We Catholics, frankly, are late to the ecological party, but we should approach ecology and the spirituality of Laudato Si as an opportunity not only to protect and defend the life of the planet, but to practice ecumenism. Not teaching, not yet, but learning what scientists and other churches and faith communities have been doing for many years. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, appeared in serialized form in The New Yorker in 1962 and became one of the founding texts of the modern ecological movement. Other churches have been greening since then, and Pope Francis credits the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew as one of his mentors in this area. Indeed, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch has been helping people weave sins against the earth into their examination of conscience. So let's think of the 2 standards. and ask which side we're on. The side of the eternal Logos, through whom all things were made, God who saw that all he had created was good, or on the side of evil, greed, indulgence, laziness, carelessness, war, fossil fuels, lack of love, and outright contempt for future generations.
With Ron's summary of the call that we have heard that both St. Francis Xavier and St. Ignatius followed, we here at St. Ignatius are also trying to hear a call and to answer that. Pope Francis initiated work leading to a new Vatican offering called the Laudato Si Action Platform. It was launched in November of 2021, and in an invitation to the whole world, Cardinal Turkson invited us to join either individually, as parishes, as part of all kinds of different Catholic communities. There are 7 sectors. There are 7 goals, which we're going to be hearing about in just a second. They are our foundation. There's a 7-year cycle starting this year for us, and then going on for another 6 years of discerning, acting, and celebrating. Father Joe has enrolled St. Ignatius in this program, and we are part of the first cohort, which has all of the challenges of being first in a new program. But there will be others to follow, so we're not alone. There are guidelines that have been provided, and we are using them as part of this program to help bring out the word for the parish. Our assignment is to create an assessment of the parish. Where do we stand today on our journey? To reflect on the parish using the tools of discernment. What resources do we have, and what kinds of things are most important to this community as we go forward? And we need to participate with all different parts of the parish. This is not something that the Green Team is doing. This is something St. Ignatius is doing. The good news is we're not starting from scratch. In the bulletin last week and in a larger handout that we have available, there are a list of things that we've already done as a community. So it's not that we're starting from scratch, but in the Jesuit tradition of Magis, we need to look for what more we can do. How can we better engage in this program? So to start, we're going to build on the foundation of the goals, and Ann Arnold will give us a summary of what those 7 goals are.
Hello. We've heard wonderful, beautiful statements about the philosophical and historical need for us to look deeper into our role in this world. And right now, the world does seem sort of a tough place, a scary place. And there are things that we can do. We must do more. We must emerge as protectors of our world. Action is needed. And in your handouts, you have the goals, the 7 goals of Laudato Si. In the other handout, there are more details underneath each one. I just want to highlight an example of what we might be doing for each of the goals. And then in a couple of minutes, when we have a discussion group, you'll have a chance to think about that some more, offer your ideas, develop some ideas, talking with each other. Goal 1, respond to the cry of the earth. Addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and sustainability. The earth is creation. We have to do more to protect it. An example of the sort of action we might take, we can alone, or better still as a community, plant native trees, native gardens. We can protect pollinators, practice regenerative agriculture. Think about the products we're using when we do our gardening. That's just one thing that might come under that first goal. Goal 2, respond to the cry of the poor. Think about the marginalized communities. We can promote eco-justice for all communities. We can protect all life and defend human life from conception to death. We can promote indigenous leadership. We can act to make sure that indigenous groups have the rights to their land. Goal 3, we can support ecological economies. The economy is a subsystem of us, of what we do, what we build. And we can change it, we can shape it by our collective actions, by our individual actions. An example, we can support ethical businesses. We can consider the total cost of our purchases, not just the price that we pay for them, but the cost in the materials that are used, in the transportation that is required to get those things to us. The fourth goal, we can adopt sustainable lifestyles. For example, reduce food waste. We can increase, I was just reminded of something from my past before all this activity. In Seattle, one thing I used to do frequently Saturday evenings, go to a bakery who would load all their not purchased stuff into my car, and I drove it to a shelter in Seattle so that food wasn't just dumped, it was used by people who needed it. We can think about bicycles and electric vehicles instead, and I think there's a good movement toward that. It's increasing. We can look at maybe seeing about charging stations close by. Goal 5, develop ecological education to foster awareness and transformative action. For example, if we want to grow awareness, maybe we encourage youth-led events, get more participation, and then recognize those young people who are working towards the goals and helping work on the events. Give them recognition. Goal 6, we can foster ecological spiritualities, recover a religious vision of God's creation. Instead of something that we just use, it is part of the creation that we save, that we preserve. For example, we can develop an annual season of creation event. Maybe reaching out and co-sponsor it with another community, so we're broadening the dialogue, broadening the action. And the 7th goal, encourage community engagement and participation. For example, we can develop ways to cope with severe change in weather and biodiversity loss. Things are happening. It can be dangerous. There are things we need to plan for and look for, and we can work to ensure that maybe marginalized communities are cared for, that we think about their transportation, their need for protection when a crisis occurs. So those are just a few examples to go with each goal, and this is what I hope is going to get your minds going and fired up and continue this dialogue when we get together in a small group right now, and Barb will get us organized there.
Okay, hi again. Now we want to hear from you. From what we've heard from the 10 takeaways from Laudato Si, St. Ignatius and St. Francis Xavier's life. Thank you, Ron, that was wonderful. And the Laudato Si goals, what has resonated with you? What has inspired you what more can we do individually and as a parish? For people who are still on live stream, the questions are posted in the chat, and you can use the chat to share your ideas. We are going to save the chat, so your ideas will be saved and included in the work. For people in the church, we have questions on a handout sheet, which I think you have, and we're going to break up into groups of 4, or I'll consult with Strat about this. We have 10 people, Strat, in addition to the team members, yeah. So 2 groups of 5. Okay, could you organize us into groups? Thank you. And then we'd like to have you brainstorm a little bit. What if this has inspired you, and what are the interests and talents you'd like to bring to this work? Okay, thank you to everybody who stayed. I think probably one of the most important things that any of us can do is to start talking and start talking to each other, to have these conversations. We're going to collect your comments and review them. Your ideas will be part of our next session on April 4th. And you're invited to come downstairs for some light refreshments and to continue the conversation. We have a small group of 3 biologists over here, and maybe other people have found commonalities. So come on downstairs. Thank you.